The hospital portal showed my emergency contact had been changed and my access to my own medical file was read-only. The front desk said the update was confirmed by the authorized companion on file. They asked if I wanted to notify him that I was there. I met him because he caught my sleeve before a fall. I tripped on the stairs outside my building carrying a bag that was heavier than it looked. He steadied me, took the bag, walked me to my door, and waited while I found my keys. He didn't ask questions. He didn't linger. He handed the bag back and said the steps were slick after rain. The next week, I saw him again at the pharmacy downstairs. He noticed the brace on my wrist and asked if it was new. I said yes. He said he'd had one that healed wrong once and asked if I'd scheduled the follow-up. I hadn't. He pulled out his phone and said the clinic upstairs was faster if you booked midweek. He showed me the screen and put it away without asking for anything. That was how he entered my life. By removing friction. He walked me to appointments when my wrist made doors awkward. He waited without hovering. Learned which forms they asked for and had them ready before I reached the desk. When the nurse asked who he was, he said, "With her." Like that was enough. It usually was. I work long hours and I hate waiting rooms. He took notes while I stared at the floor tiles. He remembered medication names. He noticed when the pharmacy substituted a brand and said something before I did. When I missed a call from the clinic, he called back from the hallway and handed me the phone when they picked up. I didn't ask him to do any of that. I didn't stop him either. The first time he stayed over was because the pain meds made me nauseous and I didn't want to be alone with it. He slept on the couch and set alarms for dosing. Left before dawn with a note that said he'd dropped off paperwork on the counter so I wouldn't forget it. After that, he appeared in the margins of my life. Not constantly. Reliably. He knew when to speak and when to wait. He learned the names of the doctors and the order they entered the room. When the clinic switched to a new portal, he helped me set it up. He stood behind me and told me which boxes to check so notifications wouldn't flood my phone. The closeness came through competence. Through him anticipating what would be asked and answering it before it became work for me. There were details that didn't snag. A prescription refill confirmed under his email because mine bounced once. A lab result notification sent to him first because he was listed as support. A nurse greeting him by name and looking to him when I shrugged. When the specialist suggested a short procedure, he asked the questions I didn't want to. Recovery time. Transport. Follow-ups. He said he could handle logistics if I wanted. He said it would keep my calendar clean. The consent packet arrived as a PDF. Dense. Familiar language. He scrolled and stopped at the signature line. Said this one allowed him to receive updates if I was under sedation. He said it didn't change anything else. He said it was temporary. I signed on my phone while he held the coffee steady. After that, the clinic stopped calling me directly. Messages came summarized. Appointments appeared on my calendar already scheduled. He'd text that it was done, that I didn't need to think about it. The day the portal changed, I was already at the hospital. I'd gone alone because it was supposed to be quick. At the desk, they asked me to confirm my companion had arrived yet. When I said I was alone, the clerk frowned and turned the screen. Primary contact, him. Viewer access, me. She said she could print things if I wanted. She said digital access followed the authorized companion. She said it was safer that way. My phone buzzed with a message from him asking if I'd made it inside. I typed yes and put the phone face down, watching the screen across the desk that showed my name below his, my information grayed out, like something I could see but not touch. After that visit, he didn't rush to explain. He met me at home with soup already heating and a note from the pharmacy folded on the counter. He said the nurse had called to confirm a time change. He said he'd moved things so I wouldn't have to rearrange my afternoon. He didn't mention the portal. He didn't mention access. I didn't bring it up either. The routine tightened around us. He walked with me when the stairs felt unreliable. Drove when the meds made me slow. Kept track of side effects without asking me to report them. When I woke at night, he was already awake, checking the clock, handing me water before I asked. That was how closeness formed. Through him being ahead of my needs. He started carrying a small folder. appointment summaries, lab slips, insurance cards I thought I'd lost. He kept it in his bag and handed things over when they were needed, then put them back without comment. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was helpful. When the clinic sent an update, he read it out loud while I sat on the couch. He paused when there were options and waited for me to nod. When I hesitated, he framed it as a choice between convenience and delay. I chose convenience. He added my calendar to his phone, just so he could remind me, he said. He didn't change anything at first. Then a meeting disappeared. Then another. He said he'd move them so I could rest. He was right. I did rest. There were moments that didn't settle. A voicemail from the insurer addressed to him that he summarized instead of playing. A follow-up email sent to his address with me copied after the greeting. A nurse asking him to confirm a detail while I was standing there. I noticed and let it pass. The first time I tried to message the clinic directly through the portal, the send button was disabled. A banner said my role had changed. Viewer only. I took a screenshot and showed him that evening. He looked at it briefly and said it was part of the new system. He said they'd tightened permissions to avoid mistakes. He said he'd asked them to fix it. He didn't say when. He stayed that night. Slept lightly. Woke before me and made calls from the kitchen with the door half closed. When I came out, he ended them quickly and asked how I felt. He listened to the answer, adjusted plans accordingly. The paperwork arrived a week later in a manila envelope. Insurance updates, release forms, temporary caregiver acknowledgement. He said the hospital required it because I'd had complications before. He said it didn't change anything long-term. He highlighted where I needed to sign. I skimmed, recognized the language, and signed while he poured tea. After that, the portal sent me a notification. Settings updated. Roles confirmed. My name was still there. Just not first. He started receiving calls I never heard ring. When I asked how he knew something had changed, he said they'd called him. He said it was easier that way. He said I didn't need the stress. One evening after a long day, I thanked him for taking care of so much. I said I didn't know how I would have managed otherwise. He said that was the point. Later, when I tried to check my test results myself, the page wouldn't load. I closed the laptop and waited for him to tell me what mattered. He did the next morning calmly, like it was already resolved. By then, I wasn't sure which questions were still mine to ask. The change announced itself as a favor. The specialist moved the procedure up. Cancellation. Short notice. He told me while I was brushing my teeth like it was weather. He said it was good news. Less waiting. Less stress. He said he'd already confirmed. I asked when. He said tomorrow morning. I paused with the toothbrush in my mouth. He watched me in the mirror, steady, patient. He said everything was lined up. He said I didn't need to do anything. That should have been the moment I slowed it down. It wasn't. At the hospital, they took his name first. Wristband printed. Consent verified. The nurse asked him to sign a form acknowledging receipt of post-op instructions. He did, handed it back, and squeezed my hand like it was routine. They asked me questions too. Name, date of birth, allergies. But when I hesitated, they looked to him. He answered cleanly, correctly. In pre-op, he held my phone while I changed. Said he'd keep it safe. Slid it into his jacket pocket without ceremony. When the anesthesiologist came in, he stood by the door and listened like someone taking responsibility for a handoff. The midpoint wasn't fear. It was relief. I remember thinking how easy it was not to hold everything myself. After, I woke to him sitting close, voice low, explaining things I hadn't asked yet. He said it went well. He said they'd already scheduled follow-ups. He said he'd handle pickup for prescriptions. He said I should rest. They discharged me into his care. At home, he set alarms, measured doses, read the instructions out loud, and then folded the paper neatly and put it away. He didn't leave. He didn't hover. He occupied the space between. That afternoon, a notification appeared on my laptop. Hospital portal update. I clicked it out of habit. Role updated. Authorized representative. Primary contact, him. My access was still there, but changed. Fewer buttons, fewer options. I didn't bring it up. I was tired. I was sore. He was already doing everything. The next few days blurred. He answered calls, rescheduled work on my behalf, sent updates I hadn't asked him to send. When I asked what the doctor had said, he summarized. When I asked to see the note myself, he said it was the same thing he'd just told me. He wasn't wrong. A courier delivered medical supplies I hadn't ordered. He signed for them, labeled the boxes, stacked them out of the way. He said it was standard after this kind of procedure. He said insurance covered it. The follow-up appointment appeared on my calendar without discussion. When I tried to confirm it myself, the clinic asked to speak with him, said he was the one coordinating care. That night, I tried to log into the portal from my phone again. The reset email went to his address. I mentioned it casually. He said he'd look into it. He said systems lagged after updates. He said it wasn't urgent. The nurse called the next morning and left a message for him. I heard his phone buzz. He stepped into the other room to return the call and came back with instructions already distilled. He said I didn't need to worry about the details. I nodded. He started referring to things as we'd need to monitor this. We'd adjust that. We'd talk to the doctor if needed. It sounded supportive, inclusive. The midpoint settled in quietly then, not as a decision but as a condition. When I needed to sign something next, another release, another acknowledgement, he didn't bring it to me. He signed it himself. I noticed because the copy he forwarded had his name on the line where mine used to be. I asked if that was okay. He said it was necessary. He said I was still recovering. He said this was exactly why the authorization existed. He said it protected me from having to make decisions when I wasn't at my best. I let that be true. That night, I reached for my phone to check something and realized I didn't know where it was. He handed it to me from the counter, already plugged in. I thanked him. I didn't ask how long this arrangement was meant to last. By then, the answer wasn't something he needed to say out loud. The recovery period stretched longer than anyone had predicted. Not dramatically, just enough that decisions kept needing to be made while I was still slow. He filled that space without asking. He said the doctor preferred consistency. He said interruptions complicated healing. The clinic stopped calling my phone entirely. Messages went to him. When I asked how things looked, he summarized in a way that made follow-up feel unnecessary. Numbers were stable. Timelines acceptable. Nothing urgent. I noticed it first when a friend texted asking how the appointment went. I hadn't known there was one. I checked my calendar. It had been added and completed while I was asleep. When I mentioned it, he said he'd told me. He said I'd nodded. He said I'd been half awake. I couldn't say he was wrong. The pharmacy started greeting him by name. Insurance mail arrived already opened, stacked neatly with notes clipped to the front. He explained benefits changes before I saw them, told me what mattered, told me what didn't. My role shrank into confirmation. One afternoon, a nurse called while I was showering. I heard his voice through the steam, calm, precise. When I came out, he said everything was fine. He said they'd adjusted the plan slightly. He said I didn't need to do anything. I asked what they'd adjusted. He said dosage timing. He said it was better this way. I let it go. The house began to reflect his systems. Pill organizers labeled by day. Notes taped inside cabinets. Emergency numbers printed and laminated near the door. He said it was just until I felt stronger. I didn't feel weaker. I felt managed. When I tried to schedule something myself, just a routine check, the receptionist said she'd need approval from my authorized representative. She said it kindly like it was a safeguard. I hung up and stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. That night, I told him I wanted access restored, just to feel normal again. He listened without interrupting. He said he understood. He said transitions were hard. He said this wasn't about control. He said it was about safety. He reminded me of the fall on the stairs, the missed follow-up, the way things had slipped before he stepped in. He said he didn't want that to happen again. I said I didn't either. The next morning, A courier delivered a packet from the hospital. New care plan. Updated authorizations. My name was on the cover. His signature was on the inside. I hadn't been asked. I called the clinic myself. Asked to speak to my doctor. They put me on hold. Came back and said the doctor was unavailable, but my representative had already been updated. I said I was the patient. They apologized and said they understood. They said protocol required communication through the authorized contact to avoid confusion. Confusion was the word they used. That afternoon, he suggested we take a short walk. Fresh air. He held my elbow, not tightly, just enough. Neighbors waved. Asked how I was doing. He answered for me. I smiled because it was easier. Later, when I tried to log into the portal again, the page loaded differently. A banner at the top said, "You are viewing this record. No edit options. No messaging. Just information." I showed it to him. He said that was expected. He said we were past the decision phase now. He said the important thing was recovery. He said I didn't need to carry everything anymore. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe, understanding that my body had become a shared project and my voice a secondary one. I told myself it was temporary. I didn't ask what would mark the end. The pressure didn't increase. It normalized. Days passed where nothing new happened, and that was the point. He kept everything smooth. Appointments attended. Medications adjusted. Messages answered before I knew they'd been sent. The absence of friction became its own argument. I started noticing the lag between when something occurred and when I learned about it. Follow-up test was done. I found out that evening. A referral was declined. He explained why over dinner. A medication was swapped. He told me after the first dose, not before. Each time the explanation made sense. Each time the window for input had already closed. I tried to reclaim small things. Asked to schedule my own physical therapy session. The clinic said they'd need to check with him. I asked to refill a prescription myself. The pharmacy said it was already processed. I asked to speak to the insurer. They asked for the policyholder's representative. That wasn't me. When I told him it was starting to feel like I wasn't in charge of my own care, he didn't dismiss it. He adjusted his tone. Slower. Gentler. He said I was still recovering more than I realized. He said it was common to underestimate vulnerability. He said he was just making sure nothing fell through the cracks. He said once I was fully stable, we could revisit everything. Stability became a moving target. The first time I missed something important, a work deadline, a call I should have taken, I went to check my calendar and realized it had been altered again. He'd moved things to reduce stress. He'd sent apologies on my behalf. He'd explained that I was focusing on health. I hadn't asked him to do that. I mentioned it carefully. He said he thought I'd appreciate it. He said I'd been overwhelmed before. He said people understood. I stopped correcting him. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone with someone I didn't recognize. He was explaining my condition in neutral terms. Not dramatic. Accurate. Framed. When he noticed me listening, he ended the call and asked if I was okay. I said yes. That night, an email came from the hospital administration. Policy update. Compliance review. No action required. Addressed to him. Copied to me. Buried in the attachment was a line that shifted something from temporary to ongoing. Authorized representative until further notice, based on clinical recommendation. I asked whose recommendation. He said the care team's. He said they preferred continuity. He said it was standard after complications. I searched my inbox for anything from the doctor directly. There was nothing recent. Everything had gone through him. The next morning, I tried to call the doctor's office again. I got as far as the receptionist, who put me on hold and then came back with an apology. She said my representative had asked to centralize communication to avoid mixed messages. Mixed messages from whom, I asked. She hesitated, then said for me. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed while he made coffee in the kitchen, moving easily, comfortably, like this was settled. When I told him what she'd said, he looked genuinely concerned. He said he didn't want me feeling sidelined. He said this wasn't about silencing me. He said it was about protecting me during a fragile period. He asked if I trusted him. I said yes because saying no would have required access I no longer had. That afternoon, another document appeared in my inbox. Not to sign, just for my records. Amendment, clarification, extension of authority. My name was there. So was his. His signature again where mine used to be. I stared at it longer than the others, trying to find the exact point where help had turned into replacement. I couldn't isolate it. By then, the system had already absorbed me as a variable instead of a voice. And he was the one translating what I was allowed to be. The call came from my employer's HR department. They asked whether I was requesting medical leave to be extended under my representative's recommendation. They said they'd already received documentation. They asked where to send confirmation. I told them I hadn't requested anything. There was a pause. Then they said the request hadn't come from me. Came from him. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said he'd acted quickly because deadlines were approaching. He said my job would be there when I was better. He said stress delayed healing. I asked how long the leave was for. He said indefinite, subject to review. That afternoon, my work email access was suspended pending documentation. A message auto-replied that I was out for medical reasons and unavailable for direct contact. It listed him as the point of coordination. I tried to log into the hospital portal again. Same read-only screen. Same banner. My phone showed missed calls I hadn't heard ring. Voicemails addressed to him. Updates. Decisions. I went to the clinic in person the next morning. Sat in the waiting room and asked to see my doctor. They told me my representative was aware I was coming. They asked me to wait. He arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't look surprised. He said we talked about this. He said showing up unannounced wasn't good for my recovery. He said we could discuss concerns at home. The nurse called his name, not mine. Inside the office, they spoke to him first. He summarized how I'd been doing. He mentioned symptoms I'd never described out loud. He used my language better than I could. The doctor nodded and adjusted notes. I interrupted once, said I wanted to speak for myself. The doctor looked between us and said that was fine, but that consistency mattered. She said conflicting input made care difficult. She asked if I felt safe. I said yes. She turned back to him. At home, he packed an overnight bag for me. Said observation would help reset things. Said it wasn't a big deal. He drove. I didn't argue. Felt easier not to. At the facility, they took my phone and handed it to him. He signed for it. They asked if there was anything else I needed. He said no. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The door closed softly and locked from the outside. The next morning, a nurse brought breakfast and asked if I'd spoken to my representative yet. She said he'd called earlier. Said everything was going according to plan. I asked when I could leave. She said that depended. On what, I asked? On authorization. That afternoon I was given a schedule. Check-ins. Evaluations. Rest periods. Everything arranged. My signature wasn't on any of it. His was. The final message from him came through the nurse's tablet that evening. He'd sent it for my reassurance. It said he was proud of me for trusting the process. It said this was the safest way forward. It said he'd visit once things stabilized. I lay there listening to the hallway sounds, realizing that my body, my work, my records, and my voice were now being managed as one coordinated system. I didn't know how long I would be there. I knew I hadn't agreed to stay. The chart at the foot of the bed listed my name. Under it, in bold, was his. Authorized decision maker. And there was no place left for me to sign.